Welcome to the Exam Study Expert Podcast, helping you ace your exams at school and university through the psychology of high performance and the science of studying smarter, not harder. It's my pleasure to introduce your host, the Cambridge-trained memory psychologist and exam success coach, William Wadsworth.
Hello and welcome to the Exam Study Expert Podcast. From time to time on the show, I like to feature the voice of real students because I think it's so important to understand how the various ideas and strategies that we talk about here on the show work in the context of a real-life situation. Today, I'm joined by Sowmya, an aspiring lawyer from India. And big shout out to our thriving listener community over in India, by the way. I hope you're all doing well. Today's conversation is an interesting back and forth. I ask questions and do a little coaching. Sowmya asks me some questions, and we both explore some of the ideas and strategies he's been applying that have been helpful to him. We'll be talking about anxiety, motivation, overcoming procrastination, and more. Challenges that affect pretty much all of us on some level for some of the time. So, without further ado, let's meet Sowmya and dive into today's conversation.
Right now, I am a final semester law student in the 3-year law course in Assam University in India. I unfortunately have had some issues with my health. So I had piled up quite a lot of exam backlogs. So I have about 12 exams to take this semester. And the exams are slated to begin this month, within 1 month. I've covered the subjects, but I'm not exactly confident on them. The biggest problem that I seem to have is, twofold. One is actually what to do when I'm studying, the act of studying. And the other issue is a little bit more about the day of the exam, which is I used to have this problem of anxiety. I don't anymore, I guess. But in about 90% of the exams, the reason I couldn't clear them was because I could not sit for more than 1 hour. And after that, my anxiety levels would shoot through the roof and I had to leave the exam hall.
So it sounds like you feel you made a little bit of progress on that more recently.
Significantly so. I have been off of any medication for anxiety and haven't had any anxiety issues since about May this year. So it's been a couple of months.
Well, look, firstly, to kind of honour what you've been going through, it sounds like it's been a tough road, to say the least. But well done for getting to this point where the finish line is in sight. Admittedly, I presume feeling the pressure a little bit with the final few weeks and 12 exams to take. How are you feeling at the moment about it all?
That's a very relevant question. This is really strange. So it got so bad with me that I did not feel exam anxiety. I wouldn't feel panicky. And even now, like I have just 1 month left, I'm not anxious. I'm not excited. I am doing as if the exam does not exist. It's kind of like not registering with me subconsciously, which kind of hampers my motivation. I have no sense of urgency.
That's quite interesting. So you're not feeling anxious or panicky, which I guess is a positive. But you're saying it's gone too far the other way, and you feel like you've lost your kind of drive.
Yes, absolutely. That is a bit of an existential issue as well. But I want to be a lawyer because I want to help people as only a lawyer can in terms of shaping the law and also shaping the policy of the law. And the problem is that there's like a significant distance between what I want to do and what resonates with me and how I can achieve that.
And what's in the middle? Is it these 12 exams next month? That's the bridge between the reality now and the dream of the future?
So I have another 13 exams to take next year. So basically clearing my exams, once that is done, I'm not worried about being employable. The problem is that unless you have a law degree, you can't be a member of the law bar.
I think it's really important to have that vision for the future. And I think having that compelling vision is often a really helpful thing. I do know what you mean about it sort of almost feels a bit too distant to be a driver. So let's just break it down. Let's take it one step at a time, one kind of day at a time. How can we use the rest of today or tomorrow to help move you towards that goal? On which note, you're talking about how you feel you've lost your drive a little bit. What does that actually mean for you in practice day to day? Are you finding it difficult to be consistent with your study routine? What's actually happening as a result of?
I literally do not study unless I have a assignment or a test the day after, or maybe sometimes at the day of, because I simply feel no sense of urgency. There's this sense of complacency as well. It's not really helpful or ideal, I understand. So I've been trying to come up with solutions because I'm fairly certain that my problems are not unique in the sense that other people have had similar issues. I don't need to reinvent the wheel. So I came across one interesting solution.
Okay.
There's this thing about mission statements. So they have prompts and questions that help you to identify what really matters to you. Because I guess when you don't have a sense of direction, it's better to get some guidance about what are the things that you need. There's also this confrontational question in the sense that it forces you to confront what is the problem. It helped me identify that I'm at my worst when I lack clear goals, reasons, or plan of action. Any of these three are missing, I will be procrastinating.
Have you ever, or recently in particular, gone through a process to decide, well, okay, this is my day-to-day goal for what you will actually do day to day? So do you have, for example, an idea of, when you wake up in the morning, these are the times I would ideally like to do some exam prep, some studying for my exams in a month. This is what I'm aiming to do in a day. Have you planned that out?
So I followed and practiced time blocking. The only way I can do it is if I do it the night before. So for example, I need to plan whatever I need to do yesterday at around, let's say, 7 p.m. The reason is because after that, I'm just too tired and I will not do it if it's any later. So I don't procrastinate on that, thankfully.
It sounds like you've had success in the past. Could that be part of our strategy to help you get consistent again now, today?
Yeah, but it took me about 3 months to make it as automatic as it is for me to brush my teeth in the morning. It takes time.
Takes time to get into the habit, get into that routine?
It takes about, let's say, 5-6 days to get into the habit, but after about 3 months, it becomes completely effortless.
I mean, that's been your experience in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that having gone through that process before, you might find you slip back into it more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess kind of the implicit worry behind what you're saying is, you don't have 3 months, you've only got a month. Maybe you could just talk me through what you mean by that strategy. So what does that actually involve in practice?
Right. So basically, I take a paper planner, or you could have even used Google Calendars. Take a list of the things that I need to do today and allocate the amount of time I think they will take, and then put them into specific time slots in my calendar or my planner. So what that does is when the appointed time comes, I don't have to even ask myself what should I be doing, because in the moment, present me is a really lazy person.
So true for many of us.
Yeah. I guess procrastination is the way to go for everyone. The only caveat that I learned through the hard way is when you're starting, whenever you think you're going to take about 1 hour to do something, assume it's going to take at least 3 times as much time. So free up your schedule accordingly. Don't cram a lot. May I ask you a couple of questions directly?
Yeah, please.
Right. So, since we're talking about the overall theme of motivation and mindset, first is the issue of procrastination that I think time block planning will help with. The issue that I face is that the path before me is not clear. I guess I'm walking through a jungle. There are bushes and brambles everywhere. There are trees, and it's slowing down my progress and it's creating a lot of friction. So I need something to nudge me in the right direction. Is there any rule that helps you to align your current action or your daily plans with your future goals, like in the abstract?
I think one of the most helpful strategies, particularly when you've kind of got a bit stuck and you need to rediscover that consistency, is just being really, sort of where I was going with the previous conversation, like just being really clear on what your goal is each day. And I think, the sort of time blocking strategy you're mentioning is sort of a version of that. My version of that is perhaps even simpler. You don't decide each night. You just decide once, and then that's your plan. Particularly when you're starting out, your version of your plan for a day might be quite conservative. There's one wonderful story. It's actually a really interesting essay that an academic, Virginia Valian, wrote when she got hopelessly stuck, not being able to work at all for months on end. And, the way she got herself out of that hole was by saying, okay, every single day, I'm going to do just 5 minutes. And the beauty of just 5 minutes was that she knew no matter what, even if she was having a really, really rough day with, mental health or whatever, like she would always be able to commit to 5 minutes. And she picked 5 minutes because that was the most amount of time she felt she could say yes to and absolutely know that no matter what, she'd be able to do it. Now, 5 minutes is quite an extreme example. The way to find the right point for you is to sort of expand the amount of time, like 5 minutes. Oh, yeah, absolutely be able to do that. 20 minutes. Oh, yeah, absolutely be able to do that. And the key is no amount of time is too small. The goal is consistency. The goal is getting moving. I think so often we look for motivation to do something, but actually far more powerful, I think, sometimes is being motivated by doing something. So just starting to make that progress motivates us in a more, I think, sustainable way than sort of looking for external sources of motivation.
This last bit about like motivation being an outcome and not of the process of movement is something that I've been thinking about and really resonates with me. A few months ago, I read on a newsletter about the fact that motivation happens after movement. So if you need motivation, start moving.
How is all this going to be relevant to you then? So how can you use this to help you now?
Well, the first thing I'm going to have to do is figure out what to study, in the sense that it's going to take a bit of planning and I need to plan with a deadline. So I can give myself maybe 3-4 hours because otherwise I'm going to just end up procrastinating. The problem with the law school in general and my university and Indian law schools in particular is that our syllabus, we can't study from just one source. We have to refer to like a bunch of different sources. We need to collate a lot of information and make our own material. I'll have to check my syllabus and make sure I have the right material or collect the right material, and then like make one integrated notebook or a Word document.
So I'm listening to you talking and I'm thinking, if I had that task ahead of me, I'd almost certainly be procrastinating on it.
Yeah.
There are certain very recognizable characteristics of tasks that will make us more likely to procrastinate on them. And that's a function of the task, not of us as an individual. So, tasks that are unstructured, tasks that are difficult, tasks that are poorly defined, tasks that are very large, tasks that might be quite, challenging or dull. And I think the task you outlined meets several of those criteria. My concern is therefore that we're going to set ourselves up to procrastinate. And obviously I want to set us up to succeed. I wonder if rather than sort of trying to set out and do that whole task you described on kind of day one, like now, I wonder if maybe we just start with something that we can make real progress on, tomorrow or over the next 3 days. Just take the next sort of 3 days as a little unit of time. I'd be thinking about which exam am I most worried about. Let's go to my syllabus for that one. And don't worry about the whole syllabus for now. Just look for a section of the syllabus that you feel is going to be particularly high yield to work on. And what I mean by that is by working on that area, you are disproportionately likely to gain extra marks. And that could be for one of two reasons. Either that is an area that tends to come up a lot, and or it might be an area you feel you're particularly hazy on. And rather than kind of trying to tackle everything and come up with, big comprehensive integrated documents or whatever, just try and focus on making some progress in that area. I understand the challenge of having no clear reference to work from and having to kind of pull things from different sources. So, for that area, then decide on what sources are going to be most important. Don't do them all. You obviously don't have time for that. So decide on like 1 or 2 or 3 sources. And okay, maybe it's not going to cover like 100% of aspects that could possibly come up in the exam, but maybe between those 2 sources, it'll get you to like 70, 80%. And then we can start to capture the key points from those sources in flashcards or smart notes or whatever strategy you're choosing. And we can talk about that in a minute. And then start to test yourself on your flashcards. That's one brick in our bridge. And then we can stack on more and more bricks as the days go by. What are your thoughts?
Okay, so the actual action of study is something that I've been thinking about as well. Assuming that a student like me has been attending classes, has been reading a little bit here and there, what we need is boot camp, something intensive. So for the first pass, the process that actually does work is, for me, something that I can outline for you. I call it debugging the essay. So the first step is a brain dump, which is I get a question or a writing prompt, usually from a previous year question paper. I write down whatever I can recollect and give myself a time limit. So I write for 25 minutes and that's it. Then the second thing is metacognition, which is about looking for any really big loopholes or errors in whatever I've written. The third thing is the friction check. See if all of the things, like whatever arguments I'm making in the essay, makes coherent sense. And fourth is simplifying it. So any thoughts on that, William?
That all sounds perfectly reasonable to me.
The problem is that I can't do it for every single question, so I will need to be selective. So the second broad theme is how much to study, in the sense that should it be time-based or task-based? And more importantly, I've realized that my health matters more to me in the now, and I'm not going to sacrifice that again. So what do I do when I'm not studying? Is there any particular piece of advice that you might like to share?
I think that sounds like a very sensible choice, and I'm a big proponent of a balanced and sustainable approach to our study routine. And that might be different for different people, and that's okay. We have to respect and honour what we need. So my favourite way to plan my time, to run my time, is to have a clear routine, clear idea of the windows of time that I'll be working each day. I've got a fairly detailed blog post where I outline my study routine when I was preparing for my finals at university. Stripping out all the breaks, it was probably about 7 or 8 hours of studying per day. That's quite a lot, by the way. Plenty of people will do somewhere in the middle, anywhere between 5 minutes and 7 or 8 hours. So it's quite a wide window of time. But then being clear on your timing. So, what time are you going to start? When are you going to take a break? What time are you going to stop? So that's kind of the container in which you will do work. I'm not a huge fan of an incredibly detailed plan for, I'm going to do this task for 2 hours, in 17 days' time, because those kind of very granular, long-ranging plans so often break down in practice. You might stick it for the first day or two and then it sort of falls apart. So what you were describing, that kind of idea of planning it for the next day with the time boxing strategy you were outlining earlier, that's quite a good approach, I think. You can decide what are my priorities for tomorrow at the end of each day. Quite like that idea. I prefer to see it as your timetable pulls in tasks into the time available, rather than you've got a task list that pushes itself into your schedule. So rather start with your timetable, start with your windows of time, and then think, how can I best use that time? What tasks can I work on in those windows that will help me make the most progress tomorrow? You don't even have to do this kind of time boxing idea where you associate a specific task with a specific window of time. You might just write out your to-do list. These are the 1, 2, 3 tasks I really want to get done tomorrow. And then at 9 o'clock or whenever your timetable starts, you start with task 1, work on that till it's done, and then you do task 2 and then task 3. And if you don't get task 3 done that day, then it rolls over to the next day. So I think that combination of the timetable, the windows of time, plus a prioritized to-do list, a clear idea of what tasks you need to do, is my favorite way to run a routine. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that actually does a lot. So in that case, the action steps needed would be, figuring out what is the amount of time available or things that are there in the syllabus. So, for example, if syllabus has, let's say, 5 units, each unit has like 5 topics. So I have 25 topics. I can rank them in whatever category, like that is going to be the missing link, I think. That is something I have not been doing because when it comes to having a to-do list, I keep forgetting that not all tasks are as important. So I get stuck in deciding which one to do first. In order to make sure that I learn from the mistakes and from the wisdom of others who've come before me, what are the most common mental models which hamstring college students in particular, in your experience?
That's a big question. I think there's a number of different things. One we've already touched on, the idea that, sometimes we get so caught up with planning every detail of every day for the next 4 weeks or whatever, that we forget to actually do some work, and maybe just sort of taking each day at a time or deciding what you're going to do for the next 3 days, just not worrying about everything else, just focusing in on that, and then trusting that in 3 days' time, you will be able to come up with a sensible next priority, and then just keep stacking those bursts of time one after the other. So I think that's one. I think the other, particularly when time is limited, letting go of the idea that you have to do everything, because you can't do everything. You don't have time to do that. And that can be a really hard thing for people to make peace with. But I think it's essential to make peace with that. Otherwise, the task overwhelms us and we don't engage with it.
So I have 2 more questions. One is, I have a lot of subjects. So while interleaving is good for long-term retention, that's not a luxury I can afford, unfortunately, right now. So is it all right if I block it and try to give myself, let's say, 3 days per subject so that I can generate momentum in the subject? Otherwise, it just doesn't get done.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fine. And actually, that's been my preference in the past as well, just to spend those kind of blocks of time, those little sort of mini sprints of 2, 3, 4 days on a particular topic or subject and really get your teeth into it and make some big, meaningful progress on it.
All right.
The thing I would say is when it comes to the final 3 days, maybe before your exam, that's when I might want to get my head up and try and do some broader coverage again of kind of multiple subjects that you'll be taking exams on. So the work you're doing now, you mentioned this sort of debugging the essay process, doing the brain dump, maybe repeating some of those exercises, particularly where your performance was particularly patchy. So as you're going through the process over the next few weeks, making a note of those topics or questions where you found it particularly challenging, where you had a lot of gaps, and revisiting those and redoing the exercise, from scratch, from memory, for those select topics or questions. So you've got some element of spaced repetition in there. I think if you're doing that, then it's absolutely fine to work in sprints of one topic at a time, as you were describing.
In that case, the last question that I had was, is there any particular mistake that people make when doing practice questions, or rather elaborative interrogations, in the sense of doing the Feynman technique? So, for example, if there's a page that I'm reading, it's really dense and technical and legally not easy. So I'm trying to explain that. Is there a kind of problem that a lot of people have when they try to generate question prompts? And is that something I can look for if I'm using, let's say, something like ChatGPT to generate prompts? That's something I've been doing.
So the process you're describing is you're reading something and then you come up with some questions on the material you've read and then you try and answer them.
Yeah.
I think this sort of thing is quite a chewy way to work. It's quite a laborious feeling way to work. So I possibly wouldn't suggest doing it for everything. It may be something you drop in from time to time on particularly important passages. But if you've got limited time and a lot to cover, and there's key bits in the passage that you feel you really need to remember in order to be able to help you write that essay, just putting those questions and answers down 2 columns of a page. So just really simple. I need to know this particular case reference, Smith versus Watson, 1987 or whatever it is. We'll do them as flashcards with question or key on one side, the answer on the other, and just really short. And, just having a handful of those really key nuggets. I'd say that's a way to sort of skate through material a little bit faster. You won't learn it as thoroughly or as deeply as if you're doing the process you were describing, but also you don't have time to apply that process to every single page you want to read. So that's the trade-off.
Thanks. That does cover up pretty much all the concerns that I had. Thank you.
Okay, so before we wrap up, what are you going to do? Talk me through your top takeaways and your plan, your thinking for the next 4 weeks.
Right. So I am going to figure out the order that I'm going to study the subjects on based on my lack of familiarity and use that to prioritize. So if I'm really weak in, let's say, tax law, I'm going to study that first. But I'm not going to give myself more than 4 days. I'm going to aim for 2 days and try to study for 6 days a week and make sure that on Sunday I have some time to recover and study less. I'm going to have to triage and eliminate a lot of things that I do usually, because if I get stuck, I need to remember what my goal is, which is clear my exam. So
yes.
Start with chunks of 25 minutes per topic and give myself a 5-minute break afterward. But if I can get into a flow state, that's even better. Then after I've completed an overview of the first subject, covering everything in a very superficial and shallow way so that I have a working idea of the things, and even if I don't remember, I can somewhat understand what's being spoken about. And then figure out what's the weakest link there and prioritize that weakest link and use the debugging process for those questions only. In general, a rule that I need to apply is realism in the short term and ambition in the long term. Ambition, I think I kind of have, as does every other listener of your podcast. But in the short term, unless we're realistic, we will suffer rather catastrophic consequences, either burning out or just sheer disappointment. I'm not going to work for more than 6 to 8 hours at least of actual studying a day. So including breaks, that's probably going to take me about my whole day, which is fine. I do get a study break. Not to be too granular in the sense of try to cover the topic, but don't be too meticulous about the planning.
Yeah.
I think these rules will keep me in good stead. And as far as bad mental habits are concerned, stop worrying, start doing. If time is limited, then realize that we don't have time to do everything and that the sacrifice that we are making is necessary. That is the key takeaways that I have.
Outstanding. Well, look, I couldn't have put it better myself. I think there's a lot of very, very sensible thoughts in your takeaways. I'm excited for you to make some progress with it all. Will you let us know how it goes?
Absolutely. Definitely going to email you about that. And I really do appreciate you taking the time out to talk to me. It means a lot. Thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure. And we will be rooting for your success over the next few weeks and beyond. Wishing you every best, Sowmya, and we'll talk soon. And if you'd like a little guidance on making the most of your limited study time ahead of exams, it would be our pleasure to help. I tend to look after our slightly older clientele, so that's our university students and professionals taking challenging exams as part of your career in medicine, finance and more, while my colleague Dr. Alex looks after our school-age clients. The results we unlock for you include helping you refine your learning processes, even if you're familiar with the basics of effective learning strategy, so you can make the fastest possible progress in the time you have available. Helping you plan your study schedule and prioritize all those tasks so you can fit everything in. Discussing cunning exam day tactics to give you the all-important edge when it matters most so that you can bring home the results you're looking for. And maybe even helping you enjoy the journey, or at the very least, helping you lift a little weight from your shoulders, dial down the stress levels, and make everything feel more manageable. To discuss how we might be able to help you, simply follow the links at examstudyexpert.com/coaching or drop me an email at william@examstudyexpert.com. And we can have a little bit of a chat about what you're working on, how things are going, and how we might best be able to help. And it would be our true pleasure to do so. Thank you so much for listening today and wishing you every success in your exams.
Just before you go, did you know you can hire William as your very own coach and mentor to show you the stress-free way to ace your exams by studying smarter, not harder? Find out how at examstudyexpert.com/coaching. Until next time.